Welcome to a brand new episode of Merchantry, PipeCandy's podcast about all things interesting that is happening in e-commerce. So the Merchantry podcast aims to be the voice of clarity. And with every episode, we bring in leaders from the e-commerce ecosystem who have a point of view and would like to share that with us. And today, I have Vikram Saxena, co-founder of BetterCommerce. Hi, Vikram. How are you?
Hi, Ashwin. Nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me over for the post podcast.
Pleasure having you, Vikram. So, like I just mentioned, what I'm really curious about is your point of view that like you gain from building better commerce. So, I'm going to start with a short introduction to who you are, what your journey has been that led you to starting better commerce. Could we start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to give you a very quick brief about myself, basically, I've now been writing code for almost 24 years. And although by education, I'm a simple BCom pass, which I barely managed to pass. But yeah, I somehow got hooked on to programming. So, I pretty much picked up programming on my own. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do in the rest of my life. And 10 years I worked in the corporate world, and then I started on my own. Started a SI company back in 2007, was doing a lot of projects. And then we built a huge platform for a company in Europe, which basically rolled out their platform across 18 countries. And it integrated all the software vendors that you can potentially think of. So it was a very, very huge platform that we built. And after that, we thought, and we were doing a lot of bespoke e-commerce websites. And that's when we said, why not bring our experience of enterprise grade software technology and the e-commerce side and make a product of our own. Because
Right.
typically, if you look at enterprise softwares are supposed to be clunky, they typically are, and are not so easy to use and are very expensive. And the time that it takes to roll them out is nightmare.
Totally.
Right. So these were the things that, and we were doing a lot of e-commerce, distribution, wholesale, all those kind of technology softwares we were building. So we said, let's build a product of our own. So yeah, that's how we started off on this journey.
Great. I think we have had a similar journey. I think between 2003 and 7, I kind of like sold about 300 plus like OS commerce installations as projects, and then said like enough of e-commerce. And it took me about 15 years to come back to e-commerce. Battle scars.
I can imagine. Yeah, those were the days of OS commerce, and WooCommerce is still there, which is a good thing. Zencart and all those.
Right, Xcard, Zencard, I remember those names.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So when did you start BetterCommerce?
So I started BetterCommerce as a company. We started it off in 2015, end of 2015. We registered the company, and then we started the development around 2016 primarily. As a platform, we started building it in 2016. We spent a year to build the first version of it, and we had already built with the foundations of as a service-oriented architecture. And that eventually has evolved into a new buzzword which we call headless. Although I think we built that enterprise platform for a business in Europe, we built that also on a service oriented architecture, and that was back in 2011. So we've been doing service oriented architecture for donkey years, but headless became a new buzzword that people started using. It's a new packaging for the same old wine.
I agree. Yeah.
Right.
Enterprises have always been building, custom software on the back end. I mean, the back end was like clunky and like they had to separate it from the front end. It was always the case. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So so headless or not, right? So what was your thesis for starting like BetterCommerce?
Like I said, the biggest challenge that we saw that, mid-market businesses, that they were good solutions for starting off a business. Shopify was already leading the market, and there are these Magento and everything around. What we saw was that, all the solutions available to start off are really good. And at a top tier of the market, the solutions were there, but they're horribly expensive. Now, what happens to the mid-market retailers, who've already started off, they've established their brand, they've established their product market fit, but now they want to grow and scale. So they were stuck with the solutions like Magento, where they had to, literally either build a huge team to maintain it, and there were constant performance problems and production problems as well. or they went with an enterprise solution like Hybris or Demandware at the time, and which took almost 18 to 24 months to launch, and then millions of pounds and millions of dollars to maintain and build them. That's why we said, this mid-market space needs a good solution, which is easy to use and solves complicated and sophisticated problems that come with the scale of a business. When you start off a business, you don't have those problems, but when you scale up, then the problems are different. So that's where we said, let's get into those kind of areas and that area, and bring a solution which does not burns a hole in your pocket, and it does not, it's not a white elephant, unlike a lot of enterprise grade software, and it's not clunky, it's not heavy, and it makes life easier for businesses. At the end, business users, and then that will benefit the businesses as well.
Right. So what's your definition of mid-market in this case?
When I say mid-market, I say, businesses who are probably upwards of 20 million or anywhere between 150 to 20 million to 150 to 200 million. Beyond that, of course, it goes into that space where people want to potentially have their own in-house team. Beyond 100 million, typically people already start looking at building a custom solution. But these days, I think, what will happen is eventually suite of commerce APIs are going to become like a database designed for e-commerce. So, like SQL and Oracle and MongoDB, they become standard databases. You don't build database, right?
Yeah.
So in future, you won't be building the base of the e-commerce. These headless suite of APIs will become a database. Then you build anything on top of them. That's how I foresee this to be evolving.
That's a very interesting take. I'll put a pin on that and come back to it. Or maybe, you know what? So an API first approach to building the storefront, like with every complexity like buried under the API layer, sounds interesting. Is there anyone like who is moving in that direction? Is it BigCommerce which is doing it? I mean, Shopify Plus, or are these all like fairly marketing heavy pitches going on now, and the real innovation happens elsewhere?
So I think what's going to happen is Shopify Plus is making huge attempts in getting that enterprise space. But I think in one of your posts itself, I saw that the adoption of Shopify Plus has been phenomenally low compared to their Shopify adoption, and that's evident because people don't perceive Shopify as an enterprise platform. It's very clear from that number itself, and it does not give you that level of sophistication, that level of control, and that level of flexibility also. You want a lot more than just a theme, right? To be able to do more and build on top of it. BigCommerce potentially is trying to do some things on there, but again, I think it is more of a marketing side on there rather than more technology innovation that they're doing in there.
Do you know of a company which is actually like making good strides on this, like apart from say BetterCommerce?
Commerce Tools has done phenomenally well on that direction, and they have become pure headless. But what I see the biggest challenge with the Commerce Tools is that if you are going to implement Commerce Tools, you really need to have a full-fledged tech team in-house. So potentially, building your merchant center. They have a merchant center, they have a basic PIM, but it is not very easy or straightforward to use essentially. So you will eventually end up building the whole merchant center, which I believe is like reinventing the whole wheel. It defeats the purpose of having that e-commerce as a database or as a complete UI. And it's like, okay, I've given you a SQL or Oracle engine. Now you build the UI for managing your database. That's not right. Something is not right. So Commerce Tools is following that approach. They built something, but it's very basic, I believe so.
Yeah, I'm very surprised there is a big market, which is a mega niche. Like there are a few tens of thousands of companies which will be in the mid-market space, and a straightforward solution that's not hooked to the idea of hiring an army of developers does not exist. That's very interesting, right? So we are still in very early days of Headless.
Absolutely,
in that sense.
It is very early days for Headless, I think, but in 5 years, I think Headless will transition into, as it will be called as e-commerce as database. Yeah, I think that marketing word is going to change. That marketing word is going to evolve because marketers need something new every 1 or 2 years.
It's not a very intuitive. We are doing a disservice to this whole idea by calling it Headless because it's not very intuitive to understand what it is supposed to do for whom.
Absolutely. So headless, if you look at it, it's a word more in the technology circle than in the business circle.
Right.
Right. And it needs a lot of education to get into the minds of the retailers who are already struggling to compete with the giants like Amazon, and, bringing your business up against these giants and surviving these times is already challenging. Then getting into the technology, rolling up your sleeves and trying to learn a new technology every 6 months is not feasible, is not right.
Right. So if you have to pitch to a mid-market retailer or a brand, right, who is already struggling with cost escalation in pretty much every department you can think about, how would you say the headless journey is going to alleviate some pains for them? What's the headless pitch to a mid-market retailer?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. As when you asked me, actually, we were pitching to a company just 2 days ago, and the guy, after seeing the demo of our platform and everything, he said, "What I love most about your platform is it does not forces me to do a lot. Plus, it does not forces me to be constrained. So it gives me flexibility to do everything. Plus, it does not forces me to build a huge tech team of my in-house." That's how I would say, we bring the end-to-end journey from product management to e-commerce to search and merchandising, plus to the order management and analytics. So we've built these capabilities as composable modules, which potentially businesses can choose. They can choose, of course, another module from another company, but build that whole journey, compose their whole solution the way they deem fit. And what it does in the process is it reduces your integration time and effort. It reduces your confusion, because these days what has happened is everybody's building a solution for a small problem. Image optimization is a problem. Let's build a plugin for it. There's a plugin for that. Now, if you look at it from a retailer standpoint, he's got probably 50 plugins or 50 different softwares to handle. He doesn't have time to handle 50 softwares, and he does not want to hire an army of 10 people to manage those 50 softwares.
Right.
He wants a solution that works end to end properly. He does not want to wait for 3 months integration with this one, then integrate this one, and then, okay, this one was missed out. So he does not want that. We offer that whole journey, end to end journey, in a very composable, in a very flexible way, and give them flexibility to choose what they want to do it with it.
Right. So I hear this word often these days for the last 1 year, composable commerce.
Yes.
That's another buzzword. Like, so
Yes,
you use the word
absolutely.
composable. So
Yes.
what is composable? What does composable mean?
So composable, if you look at it, the idea is, let's say you are using a different PIM. Let's say a lot of big companies, they tend to use this word more often than mid-market, essentially. But the idea is essentially wherein you use best of breed solution. So you're using, let's say, another product for PIM from another company. You're using Amplience for your content management. You're using commerce tools for e-commerce or BetterCommerce for e-commerce. And then you're using, let's say, any other tool, Power BI or anything else from an analytics standpoint. So basically, you are building a solution, and I think this has, again, existed forever. It's just that it's being packaged again. It's the old wine packaged in a new bottle. That's what it is. Now you're just selecting best of breed software is retermed as composable. That's what it is in simple
terms.
So
it's the past buzzword, best of breed, like now called composable.
Yes.
Okay. So it's all simple.
Yes.
Right. So when we talk about mid-market, right? Like, so there are a couple of types of mid-market companies. The common, I mean, in conversations that I have about Headless, one of the things that I hear is, if you are a fashion brand which is, trying to build a positioning which is very distinct and unique, a typical Shopify template will let you down. So you are better off like running your front end the way you deem fit, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense for you to go to a headless approach, right? The same, I would not, I might be wrong. I mean, that's kind of what I want to hear from you. If you take a multi-brand retailer, who is essentially playing the inventory e-commerce model, where they would bring in multiple brands and give the convenience of shopping. So let's say a general merchandise company, which does not care much about how the front end looks, as much they care about how efficient it is and how fast you can go to the checkout and so on, right? So is there a difference in adoption between these two kinds of situations, category specific differences? brand versus retailer specific differences and so on.
So you're saying it may not be suitable for multi-brand retailers essentially, right? So it's very interesting you say that. Our biggest customer is actually a multi-brand retailer, and they sell only fragrances. And you will not believe. See, I believe in future, it's not going to be pure selling. You have to add some value in there. Pure selling and look and feel will matter quite a lot. I think Apple changed everybody's perception around look and feel and user experience side of it, right? They just transform that perception throughout the world, that it has to be good and your checkout has to be. And Amazon changed the simplicity how you do the checkout and everything around that. Now, this multi-brand retailer that we have on our platform, the fragrance shop, basically what they've done is they've built so many phenomenal capabilities. And again, it's all part of the platform, and then they built their own UI. So they offer subscription. They offer Prime style paid membership where you get free deliveries and discount vouchers as well. Now, all of these capabilities building on top of Shopify is not so easy.
Right.
It is an extremely complicated thing. And when you get into multi-brand retailing, a lot of times and if you're doing multi-category as well, then there are category specific nuances. For example, for beauty, you may want, you want to capture some information about the customers and give them personalized results. Now that again becomes a front end and a back end marriage. It has to work that way, that you're able to capture their explicit survey response, what kind of body you are, what kind of fragrances you like, this tone, that tone. And once you capture that information, you start to offer much more personalized experiences to the customers, which help you improve your loyalty and stickability on the website, and thus improves your conversion rate and your orders and everything.
Right. So this is not so much of a question, but I want to think along with you on a certain thing that I'm seeing, hypothesis, so to speak, right?
Sure.
So e-commerce technology stack is becoming increasingly, we see a duopoly, right? Like Amazon, trying to build a Shopify killer and vice versa as businesses, right?
Yes.
The buy with Prime is the latest example of that, right? They are squarely getting into the DTC territory, right? Whereas Shopify trying to build this fulfillment arm, rumors about deliver acquisition and all of that.
Absolutely.
Right? So the wars are no longer just on the technology platform, but as a brand, I have options in front of me. Yes, there is a storefront technology that I can buy from Shopify, but I can also get better rates for my shipping, right? I can also get a warehouse and so on. Or if I go with Amazon, I also get listing there. I can do faster checkout with Amazon Prime and so on and so forth, right? So there are considerations which are beyond just technology.
Absolutely.
When you choose a platform.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I understand why, because there is significant cost saving. I was just doing a back of the envelope calculation. If you get all the services from one player, like say Amazon, even as a DTC brand, you're saving somewhere between 15 to 20% on your top line, on your spend, right? That is significant in today's environment. So does this mean that there are only a certain set of companies which can afford to make decisions on which vendor to work with purely based on the merit of the technology? Will that tribe be more and more upper mid-market and enterprise customers who can have their own logistics, have their own national delivery, independent of their relationship with Amazon or whoever else, and hence can choose a technology platform of their choice? Do you think that is going to happen?
I think, firstly, I would say, technology or a platform should never be chosen for its technology capability or for, that it's the cool technology. No technology decision should ever be made on that parameter. Technology is an enabler. It should never be looked at, the cool factor. A lot of people do that actually. The valuations, people use technology as a valuation metric as well. But I honestly believe technology should be used for its appropriate usage and delivering value to the business and being as a proper enabler for the business. Now, coming to the Amazon world, if you look at it, Amazon, you can of course do a lot of listings. Amazon is an amazing marketplace and of course world leader in that space. But the challenge with that is, firstly, it takes up a lot of commission as well. Secondly, it has started cannibalizing a lot of small brands.
True.
right? It has started cannibalizing that significantly. Now, plus customers may or may not, you will not have customer data. Eventually, that data is the gold dust. That's where the future revenue of the brands are going to be established. With Amazon, you can get traction, initial traction. But if you think about just building a brand on Amazon, I don't think that's, of course, some people can, but majority of them will not be able to do that. Whereas if you look at something like Nykaa, if Nykaa had only gone through Amazon, did not launch their own website and store, they wouldn't have been where they are. Of course,
Absolutely.
there will be businesses who will potentially go on to become listed despite just being on Amazon, but I see the chances of that happening very low. So if you want to grow the business and if you want to build a brand of your business, then eventually you have to build your own website. Now, looking at the Shopify side of it, in terms of the moment you try to scale beyond certain values, you've seen those numbers, Shopify becomes very constraining, not just from a front end perspective but even from back end perspective. And again, that challenge that I mentioned, the integration of with 40-50 people or plugins, is a different nightmare to handle on a regular basis. So
Right.
with those challenges, there is always going to be a need for building something of your own where you can tailor your customer experiences. You can give them something more than what your other cookie cutter customers, competitors are doing, essentially. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that makes total sense. So just like to build on that question, so if I'm a brand who has increased supply chain costs because China is locking down, and freight costs are increasing, and I'm not able to plan inventory well because some demand so far has been coming through because of stimulus checks, and that's not happening now. So my inventory models are all forecasting higher inventory uptake from the aisles. That's not happening anymore. So my inventory carrying costs, warehouse costs are increasing, and Amazon comes and says, here is buy with Prime, and your conversion is going to increase. I would sign a deal with the devil.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. In the short term, you will. But if you start looking at it from a long term perspective, you will still be thinking in the back of my mind, how do I eventually, bring customers onto my website? How do I build that customer data at my end? Because if you look at it, if duopoly or monopoly in any space is not good for any business.
No, but let me place an argument there. In a first ever strategic shift, right? Amazon is saying, I'll put the button on your website. Your data is your data. You have access to customer data. I will bring the might of 40 million Prime customers who have probably not known your brand. Now they will see that golden color, buy with Prime, and they'll trust you because they trust me, and I'm going to give you the data. That is a compelling proposition. I mean, yes, I'll have the fear that you would you launch a private label with my data. But it's a significant shift.
It is, and a lot of people will do that. But just this other brand that I was talking to you about that we did a demo to, he said, why would I do that? Why would I give my customer data to Amazon? I mean, I'm already selling on Amazon, and eventually I want to move away. I want to, as of today, I'm doing 70% on Amazon, 30% D2C. I want to reverse those numbers. I want to reverse that ratio. Then why would I want to put their button on my website, and instead of making 70%, bringing it down to 30%? Why would I make it 90%? This was his perspective. And this is a very relatively upcoming brand, and they've done phenomenally well in just 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a valid concern. Yeah, right. You don't know what territory you're treading with when it comes to Amazon.
Yes.
Right, and they haven't been very reliable partner, especially when it comes to their private label strategy.
Absolutely, you don't know what they might just do that. In fact, this guy, I was talking to him. He said Amazon actually approached us to build a private label product for them. We said absolutely no. Why would we do that? Now, just on the similar lines, there's a group called the Hut Group. I'm sure you've heard of that, right? The Hut Group. So Hut Group actually follows that same model. They will give you technology, they will give you a warehouse, they will give you their whole might all over the world, global shipping, global funding, everything. And they have, I think, good amount of 250 good brands. They are not small brands, really big brands under the Hut Group, and they all run that. But then again, a lot of businesses, fashion businesses that I spoke to, they said, no, we don't want to go to the Hut Group. We don't want, we want to control our brand and build our own brand. So at the end, it will also have to be aligned, with every business's aspirations and what they want to do. Whether it aligns with their vision or not, what exactly do they want to do eventually? And if it's just about running the business on the side, that's fine. Go to the Hut Group. They will take care of all the challenges, of course, take a little bit of major cut, but then you are just sitting relaxed and everything is happening on its own. So it's entirely up to you how you want to do it.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's the stakes are real for like brands, like, how much dependence on platforms can they afford, like in the long term, the medium term, yes, like when there are economic cycles and so on. Can you paint the picture of who are the headless players today, and where do you think like you stand in comparison with like how the headless market is evolving?
See, Commerce Tools is the leading giant in that space, and I think there are a few others. Elastic Path as well has come up really well. I haven't seen their product as such. Commerce Tools I've explored a bit. Elastic Path, I haven't seen their product, but of course they have the might. But they're a huge enterprise company since the dog years. I don't think Elastic Path is a new company. It's been there for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
So how much have they actually built for cloud and how much have they refactored for cloud? I really don't know, and I can't say. Where we stand, we are relatively new and we are not funded per se. So it's all bootstrapped so far with a very small, friends and family kind of round in there. And we are now doing our go-to-market. So 3-4 years we've survived on our own, on customer money. And I strongly believe customer money is better than investor money. It gives you more sustainability, it gives you more value, and it makes you a little bit more frugal as well. And it forces you to offer better value rather than you just splurge on your marketing and don't worry about what happens if the customers are not happy. And there are examples of that as well. I won't name those companies. There are companies which are valued in billion, but their product is probably just less than half of what we have essentially. And it's not something that I say. I've heard from people within that company itself. So there are business models like that as well. So we are just getting started, but I think there's good scope and good potential for us to grow in next 3 to 5 years and become a really good sized company and offer value to a lot of retailers.
Right. I think it's not a winner takes it all kind of a market, right? Like, so e-commerce is, I saw an interesting graph. The percentage of e-commerce, e-commerce as a percentage of retail has actually come back to the pre-pandemic level.
Yes. Right? Yes. It is
so the line came like this, it went like this, and it has come back like this, right? Yes, so that's a very interesting turn. And it's not very surprising either. So you're still talking about 85% of the market still making that, having a potential, giving a potential headspace for, turning into like e-commerce first. And that means there's room for multiple players.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
For every Shogun, every fabric that you would find, there can be like 10 BetterCommerces.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So is there a segment or like is there a geographical market that that you would focus on, or is it primarily the US?
So we started with our focus in the UK, and this year we've started looking at India as well. So we've started some conversations in India as well. So I think this year we're going to start doing some, because I think now, until 2 years back or 3 years back, India wasn't really open to or headless was not even a word here, and people did not really understand. I think even now it's not so much, but at least people have started evaluating and looking at it as to what it is and trying to understand. So I think this year we're going to start doing some inroads in India as well. So these are the two geographies that we are currently looking at. And with perspective of US, we're looking for some good partners to, take us there. From a product perspective, we've got everything that it takes. Now it's more from a reach perspective that we're looking for partners in the area.
Okay. So Vikram, you talked about composable commerce and best of the breed software and so on, right? Um, that kind of gives me a little bit of jitters, because if you start an e-commerce company today with, like, say, Shopify or like even BigCommerce and so on, you're used to a lean team and offload all the technology complexities to the e-commerce storefront, right? But when you're growing, like when you're like hitting the 15 million, 20 million GMV mark, and like you want to like build something on your own, and you have seen the limitations of Shopify, it's kind of very easy to say that, you know what, like these platforms don't work. I know exactly what I want, what my customers want. I'm going to build it all myself, right? And at that point in time, the company has a CTO, right?
Yes.
And good or bad, a CTO needs a team, right?
Yes. Yes.
Where does this lead to?
It's a very interesting thing, Ashwin. I've seen this in 2, 3 large enterprises. What they've done is, so there is this really huge business in India, and I won't name the business. They were running Hybris, and then they hired a new CTO who came in, and he said, you know what, it's not working for the business. And because he had experience with Salesforce Commerce, he re-platformed over next 2 years to Salesforce Commerce. And now the whole shift was from, they initially took Hybris 3, 4 years to stabilize Hybris, and now they moved to Salesforce Commerce because the new CTO is more comfortable with Salesforce Commerce. This is one problem that I've seen. Second problem is you end up with such a huge team, and then that lean, that agile words only remain words and only remain part of presentations. They are gone out of principle and practice completely. Because then you've got, 5 different people who are responsible for PDP. And I don't understand why you will need a team of 5 people to manage a PDP on the website. And I've seen, trust me, I've seen businesses where they've got, a product owner for PDP and PLP. I said, what? You can't have a product owner just for PDP and PLP. They're not such big things. Of course, they are important landing pages in your storefront journey and all of that, but you can't do. So that's like trying to overcomplicate things. It leads to a lot of overcomplication. And then what happens is you get into that circle of that you're sitting on a tiger. Now you can't get off and you're running on it because it's going to eat you.
Right.
So now you're in that cycle and you just cannot get off, because now you will have to constantly justify that, okay, we are doing this, so we need this much more cost. Now we need more resources. And resources, technology resources are always going to be short. No matter what you do, there's always going to be shortage of good technology talent, no matter what you do. And retaining them is going to be a bigger challenge, especially in the new modern world, where 3-month notice and work from home have become a default standard and a default perk. It's a nightmare to retain talent for technology companies. Forget about retail companies, who are not even bent towards the modern technology per se. For them, it's even more challenging. So I think it leads to over complexity. It leads to huge costs. And we've seen businesses burning money like anything without realizing it. Now, business people don't understand technology, so they are given a very different picture. No, we are doing this. It's become this complex. And then technology is made the devil. No, it is complex, so it takes more time. Small changes, which are supposed to be done in 3 days or a week time, they take months. And that's what happens. And eventually your business suffers. You are left behind compared to your competition, right? So that I think to grow your business, that agility, that leanness has to be maintained. And you have to question every additional resource that you add. Do we really need it? A lot of times when our client comes to us, we need 2-3 people, in my SI company, businesses come to us, we need 3 more people. I tell them, no, you don't need 3 people. Tell me, why do you need 3 people? So I ask them to justify that those 3 people, and until they justify it properly in writing, I don't add. I said, okay, let's do one thing. I will only add 1 person for now. Let's see if we can manage with that, and then go from there. Because I'm not focused on billing customers. I'm focused on delivering value, and delivering the value at the right kind in the right time, and giving them the right advice. That's what makes us different, essentially.
Right. So there is a best of breed world. And then there is the best of both the worlds world, right? Like, so if you really want to actually liberate and give a better experience for your customers, you don't directly jump from like a platform-based approach to like custom software development.
Yes.
There is an in-between world, which is like, do all the things that you want in the front end,
Yes.
and don't take on the back end complexity yet.
Absolutely. And that is the selling pitch for Headless.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I mean, e-commerce becomes a database. So e-commerce is a database. That's what I look at Headless transforming into.
Right. So that brings us to the end of the segment. I'm still not going to leave you. I have a few rapid fire questions for you. Who are some exciting people or exciting companies that you look up to in terms of how they execute?
I think one that I really like most is about Commerce Tools, how they built the whole pure headless engine side of it. And of course, I admire Shopify for what they've done. It's phenomenal. So these are the two companies that I primarily admire, and Amazon for its simplicity.
Right. Great. So if you were to go back and look at your journey of BetterCommerce, what would you do differently?
I would probably focus a little bit more on marketing side of it rather than just building the product with my head, with living inside the well, just building the product. I would probably start looking outside the well a little sooner and focus on going out to the market a little earlier. That's one thing that I would definitely do different.
If you are going to advise someone who is trying to build an e-commerce software or plugin, what is your advice to them?
So if you're building an e-commerce software, I think firstly, what the big problem that I see in today's world is that people are solving very small problems. Now, what happens is a very narrow, a very pointed solution. Of course, it has its pros and cons, but I feel that pointed solution has to fit somewhere in the bigger picture. Now, bigger picture for every customer is going to be slightly different. Now, what happens is when you're building that small pointed problem with an opinionated approach, now that bigger picture, how will it fit into that bigger picture becomes a huge challenge for retailer to figure out. Right. They have that problem and now they're trying to figure it out how to fit this in. A lot of times what happens is it ends up being a round hole, trying to fit a square peg in the round hole. And this happens quite often and people force it. And this is very common in the Shopify, Magento world, very, very common. Okay, it does not solve all our purpose, but at least it solves some part of our problem. So let's just go with it for now and we'll see in future. And the thing is, you never go back to it in the future.
Yeah, and also Shopify has made it super easy for plugins to list and there's no marketplace fee now.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, Shopify is verticalizing. They are building checkout, they are building the key pieces of the puzzle themselves.
Correct.
Right. So yeah.
I think the only company which will potentially be able to give competition to Amazon in the long run is going to be Shopify.
Right. Yeah. And they will do what is right for them, not necessarily what is right for the marketplace, app marketplace. Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, Vikram, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think we can together finally clarify what Headless is and when Headless is the right strategy for up and coming retailers. Thank you so much for those perspectives. And with that, we wrap this session of Merchantry Podcast with Vikram, who is the founder of BetterCommerce. Check them out. Vikram, what's the website that they should visit? And if they have to find you on social, how do they reach out to you?
It's bettercommerce.io. That's the website. And we are available on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. If you search for BetterCommerce, we'll show up.
Perfect.
Personally, I'm sorry, but I'm not too much active on social media.
That's the marketing part that you said you will take up, right?
Yeah, I know. Okay. That's where I lag. Thank you, Ashwin. It's been great. It's been a pleasure, talking to you and having this conversation.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for that.